Imagine you are walking down a really busy street in a major metropolitan area.
Right.
It's late afternoon, and you see a black 1998 Chevy Blazer parked right along the curb.
Just a completely normal sight.
Exactly. It looks entirely unremarkable from the outside. But if you were to actually walk up to the window and look inside, you would see a purse just sitting on the seat.
Which is already a red flag.
Right. And you would see a pair of shoes, you'd see a pair of prescription glasses, and you would see a driver's license.
Wow.
But what you wouldn't see is the driver.
Yeah, the one thing that's supposed to be there.
Exactly. Now, usually when we talk about a mystery in these types of analytical discussions, there's a very specific traditional framework that comes to mind. We tend to think of the classic locked room scenario.
Right, the impossible crime trope.
Yeah, where you have a confined space, a bolted door, and this impossible situation where someone just vanishes from a completely sealed environment. It's a concept that absolutely demands a logical explanation for something that appears physically impossible.
Because people don't just dematerialize.
Right. But for this immersive exploration, we are going to apply that exact concept to the open road.
Which is a fascinating shift in perspective.
I mean, we are looking at a scenario where a person doesn't vanish from a sealed room, but seemingly evaporates from their own vehicle in the middle of a densely populated city, and they leave behind the very items required to navigate the world.
Their essential tools?
Yes. Today, we are tracing the life and the utterly perplexing disappearance of a 23-year-old woman named Phoenix Coldon.
It's a case that really requires strict objective analysis.
It does. This is an exploration that exposes massive systemic law enforcement blind spots. And, we have to look at the devastating, completely life-altering toll that this extracts from the families who are left behind.
The collateral damage is immense.
It really is.
Right.
We are looking at a timeline that spans over 14 years, 3 months, and 4 days of just complete and total silence.
That measurement of time is, it's honestly the most staggering data point we have on record.
14 years is a massive void.
Right. To maintain complete silence for over 14 years, 3 months, and 4 days requires either an intentional, flawless evasion of all modern tracking systems.
Which is nearly impossible today.
Exactly. Or it requires a tragedy so sudden and so absolute that it leaves absolutely no secondary ripples.
Yeah.
The open road is, it's the opposite of a locked room in theory. But in practice, a moving vehicle actually acts as a sealed personal ecosystem.
I hadn't thought of it like that, but yes.
So when that vehicle is discovered, abandoned, with no signs of a struggle and all of the occupants' essential belongings left inside, the vehicle itself basically becomes the locked room.
Right, it's the sealed container.
Yes, it becomes a container of questions with absolutely no answers. The surrounding environment is vast, obviously.
Right.
But the actual point of disappearance is incredibly narrow and isolated.
So to really understand how someone steps into that kind of void, you have to understand exactly who they were before the timeline fractured.
The biographical context is essential here.
Right. We are looking at a life that began in 1988 in California, and the early records indicate she was born as, quote, Phoenix last name unknown.
That's a very specific official designation.
Yeah, and that specific detail suggests a very unstable, perhaps chaotic entry into the world.
It certainly implies a lack of immediate familial structure right at the start.
Exactly. But her trajectory changed entirely when she was adopted by Goldia and Lawrence Coldon.
Right.
And the family eventually relocated to Missouri due to Lawrence's career, and it was there in Missouri that she was formally adopted.
Okay.
The environment she was raised in by the Coldons is, it's a stark contrast to that initial birth record. It was highly structured.
Very regimented.
Yes, she was mostly homeschooled. She was deeply involved in extracurricular activities, demonstrating a really high level of proficiency by playing a variety of musical instruments.
Which requires immense focus.
Right. And even more uniquely, she achieved the status of a local junior fencing champion.
The psychological and developmental profile that emerges from that specific background is just crucial for analyzing her later actions.
How so?
Well, being born without a recorded last name implies, as we said, an entry into the world lacking that immediate infrastructure. But her adoption by Goldie and Lawrence provided this profound pivot into an environment of intense stability. It was protective.
Very secure.
Exactly. And homeschooling is, by its very nature, a highly curated educational experience.
Because the parents are directly managing everything.
Right. It requires immense dedication from the parents, and it creates a controlled, sheltered environment for the child. It inherently limits the random, chaotic variables and the social frictions that children in traditional public or private schooling encounter on a daily basis.
That makes sense.
You are essentially managing the inputs and outputs of a child's daily social interaction.
And then you add the extracurriculars on top of that curated environment.
Right.
I mean, it's one thing to take a few piano lessons or play in a local soccer league, but it's entirely another to master multiple musical instruments and become a recognized local junior fencing champion. Fencing isn't just a sport you pick up on a random weekend.
No, absolutely not. It's a highly demanding discipline. Let's really look at the mechanics of what it takes to be a junior fencing champion.
Okay, let's break that down.
Fencing requires rigid discipline, intense physical conditioning, and a highly developed sense of spatial awareness.
Right.
A fencer must constantly anticipate their opponent's movements, reacting in fractions of a second within a very confined strip of space.
It's very contained.
Extremely. It is a sport built entirely on strict boundaries, complex rules, and structured engagement. You are taught to control your impulses and carefully calculate your strikes.
That's a lot of mental control.
It is. And then you combine that physical discipline with the mental endurance required to learn multiple musical instruments. Mastering an instrument demands hours of solitary repetition, focus, and, delayed gratification.
Right.
The portrait we have here is of a young woman who was incredibly focused, highly disciplined, and completely accustomed to operating within very clear, secure boundaries. Boundaries that were set by both her parents and her chosen pursuits.
Which brings up a massive contradiction, I think.
How do you mean?
Well, when someone's life is this regimented, this structured, and locally celebrated for their discipline, does it make a sudden, untraceable disappearance even more statistically unusual?
Oh, absolutely.
Because you have this highly structured, secure early life crashing headfirst into a chaotic, completely unresolved void. It feels like the antithesis of everything she was trained to do.
If we look at the broader metrics of missing persons cases, her background definitively makes this unusual.
Right, because usually there are signs.
Exactly. Most adult disappearances have preceding indicators. You often see a history of transient behavior, escalating substance abuse, severe mental health crises that are publicly documented, or maybe a pattern of slowly removing oneself from social circles and obligations.
Like a gradual fade.
Yes. But Phoenix's background doesn't fit the typical profile of someone who voluntarily vanishes into the margins of society. Her life was deeply anchored in routine and constant familial observation.
She was very visible to her family.
Precisely. When an individual with such a heavily anchored, disciplined background disappears without a single trace, it strongly suggests that whatever interrupted her timeline was either an overwhelmingly powerful external force or a deeply hidden internal crisis.
A crisis that she managed to conceal.
Right, a crisis she concealed with the exact same discipline she applied to her fencing and her music.
Wow. So let's look at the exact moment that structured life fractured.
Let's get into the timeline.
We are focusing strictly on the timeline of December 18th, 2011.
Okay.
Phoenix is 23 years old. The geographic setting is Spanish Lake, Missouri.
Right.
And it's a Sunday. At approximately 3:000 p.m. local time, she leaves her family home. She's driving her vehicle, the black 1998 Chevy Blazer.
And she's observed leaving.
Yes. Her father, Lawrence, actually observes her leaving, and he believes she is heading somewhere entirely routine.
Just a standard errand.
Right. He assumes she's going to a convenience store just around the street, or possibly over to a friend's house. It's a completely mundane Sunday afternoon departure.
That mundanity is the most critical aspect of this initial timestamp.
Because there was no conflict.
Exactly. There was no documented argument. There was no dramatic exit or sign of distress. She just leaves in the mid-afternoon, in broad daylight, under the assumption of a quick errand.
It's so ordinary.
Think about this behavior pattern for yourself. It's something you have likely executed thousands of times. You grab your keys, you start the car, you intend to return in 20 minutes. It is the absolute baseline of normal, everyday mobility.
Right, you don't even think about it.
There is no heightened state of alert for the person leaving or the people watching them leave.
But that baseline shatters incredibly quickly.
Very quickly.
Just 2 hours and 27 minutes later, at precisely 5:27 p.m., that same black 1998 Chevy Blazer is discovered.
Abandoned.
Yes, it is abandoned. But it's not found around the street near a convenience store in Spanish Lake. It is found on St. Clair Avenue in East St. Louis, Illinois.
Which is a crucial detail.
It is. This location is exactly a 25-minute drive from the Coldon family home, and crucially, It is across the Missouri-Illinois state border.
This geographic shift demands really intensive analysis because it changes the entire context of her departure.
How so?
Well, Spanish Lake, Missouri and East St. Louis, Illinois represent very different environments, and they are separated by the Mississippi River.
Right, it's a major physical barrier.
A 25-minute drive is not a casual wrong turn when you are purportedly heading to a local corner store.
You don't accidentally end up there.
Exactly. To get from Spanish Lake to East St. Louis requires intentional navigation. It requires getting on major roadways, merging into highway traffic, physically crossing a massive geographical boundary river, and entering an entirely different state jurisdiction.
It's deliberate.
What this 25-minute drive tells us is that the original stated intent, or at least her father's assumption of her intent, was either incorrect from the very moment she turned the ignition, or it was violently altered immediately upon leaving the driveway.
Here's where I want to push back a little on the idea of the routine errand.
Go ahead.
Think about a satellite in orbit. It follows a very specific, mathematically predictable path.
Right.
When a satellite breaks its expected routine orbit, something significant must have altered its trajectory. It doesn't just drift without a catalyst.
That's a good analogy.
If you leave at 3 p.m. for a quick errand, how do you end up 25 minutes away across the state border within a 2.5-hour window?
It doesn't add up.
Right. Either the destination was planned and kept secret from her family, or she was intercepted on the road, or a sudden urgent situation compelled her to cross that bridge into Illinois.
You know, the 2.5-hour window is a massive expanse of unaccounted time when you factor in a 25-minute drive.
Because the drive is so short relative to the total time.
Exactly. She could have arrived in East St. Louis by 3:30 p.m., leaving nearly 2 hours of stationary or pedestrian time before the vehicle was officially discovered by authorities.
Or she kept driving.
Right. Alternatively, she could have driven around for 2 hours before parking there. This ambiguity is precisely why we really must address the severe misinformation that plagued the early hours of this case.
You're talking about the engine.
Yes. It was initially reported and widely circulated in the press that the Chevy Blazer was found with the engine still running.
Which is terrifying.
It is, but this was later proven entirely inaccurate. The vehicle was turned off.
That false initial report is so damaging to an investigation.
It throws everything off course.
It paints a completely different picture. I mean, a running engine implies immediate, sudden interruption. It suggests a driver who just stepped out for a single second, perhaps to check a tire or speak to someone through a window, and was snatched.
Exactly.
But an engine turned off implies parking, intention, and an expectation of stepping away from the vehicle.
It drastically alters the psychological profile of the scene. When law enforcement or the media latches onto a dramatic detail like a running engine, it forces investigators to look for an immediate, violent abduction scenario within a very tight radius of the car.
Because they think it just happened seconds ago.
Right. It suggests the event happened right before discovery. When it is later revealed the car was turned off, the radius of possibility expands outward exponentially.
It changes the whole timeline.
It means the driver could have intentionally walked away, met someone at a predetermined location, or transferred to another vehicle voluntarily. The correction of that fact often comes way too late.
The golden hours are lost.
Yes. Crucial early hours are wasted pursuing a narrative built on a completely false premise while the actual trail goes cold.
And the complications regarding law enforcement only compound from there. We really enter what can only be described as a jurisdictional black hole.
It's a procedural nightmare.
Let's look at the timeline following the discovery of the car. The vehicle was officially impounded at 6:23 p.m. It was entered into the Illinois police database simply as an abandoned vehicle. Because it was an Illinois database, the Missouri police did not identify it during their initial investigation into Phoenix's disappearance.
Which is just staggering.
The Coldon family was left entirely in the dark. Law enforcement did not notify them at all.
They had no idea.
In fact, it was a family friend who was conducting an independent search who miraculously managed to track down and discover the Blazer sitting in a tow lot.
This represents a catastrophic systemic failure.
A complete breakdown.
We are talking about an invisible wall constructed by state borders and segmented regional law enforcement databases. In 2011, despite the technological advancements available at the time, the interoperability of municipal and state databases was severely lacking.
They just didn't talk to each other.
Right. An abandoned car in East St. Louis, Illinois, is treated as a municipal nuisance, a parking violation to be cleared from the street.
A completely low priority.
Meanwhile, a missing 23-year-old woman in Spanish Lake, Missouri, is treated as a local missing persons inquiry by a completely different department. The fact that these two data points, separated by only a 25-minute drive and a river, did not automatically intersect in a regional system is a glaring flaw.
It really is.
It creates a devastating loss of time, which is the most critical resource in any missing persons case.
Because of this delay, the initial processing of the vehicle wasn't handled as a potential crime scene related to a missing person.
It wasn't preserved.
No, it was handled as a routine tow job. So when the family finally got access to the vehicle and conducted an independent search of their own daughter's car, the physical evidence they discovered inside was chilling.
The inventory is very telling.
Left behind in the SUV were her glasses, her purse, her shoes, her identification, and a cell phone bill that had been sent to collections.
We really need to analyze this inventory of items carefully because it presents a deeply contradictory narrative regarding human behavior. When a person leaves a vehicle voluntarily, they take their operational tools with them. Identification is required for almost any transaction, travel, or interaction with authorities.
You don't leave your ID.
Exactly. A purse contains financial resources and personal items. Shoes are a basic requirement for mobility in an urban environment like East St. Louis.
You can't just walk away barefoot.
And glasses are literally required for basic sensory navigation. To leave these specific items behind suggests extreme haste, physical impairment, or coercion. You do not voluntarily walk into a city without your shoes or your ability to see clearly.
I look at it as leaving behind one's armor.
That's a powerful way to frame it.
Leaving shoes, glasses, and identification is like leaving behind the fundamental tools required to navigate society safely. But then we have the outlier in that list. The cell phone bill that had been sent to collections?
The one piece of paper?
Right. If the DNA testing on the vehicle later proved that absolutely no one else had been in that car except Phoenix and her parents, we have to look strictly at her own actions.
We have to assume she was alone in the car.
Does leaving behind a collections bill alongside essential items like glasses point toward overwhelming financial or personal stress rather than an interception by a stranger?
You know, the DNA evidence is the absolute anchor in this case.
It's definitive.
It is. Forensics established that there were no foreign fingerprints, no foreign DNA, and no sign of a physical struggle with an unknown entity inside that confined space.
So no one attacked her in the car.
It effectively isolates Phoenix as the sole actor within the vehicle leading up to the exact moment it was parked. Because of this, the collections bill cannot be dismissed as random clutter.
It has to mean something.
A bill in collections represents a hidden pressure. For a young woman raised in a highly structured, disciplined environment where expectations were likely very high, financial failure or a hidden debt could manifest as a profound psychological burden.
It could feel insurmountable.
Exactly. The presence of that document, sitting among her most vital personal effects, could be interpreted as a symbol of an internal crisis reaching a breaking point. It provides a potential motive for a voluntary departure from her known routine, which then led to an unknown secondary event outside the vehicle.
And whatever that secondary event was, it resulted in absolute finality.
Complete cessation.
The records show a complete stop of all digital activity from that day forward. There was no further activity on her bank accounts. Her cell phone never pinged another tower or made another call. Her social media accounts went entirely silent.
That's incredibly difficult to achieve.
In 2011, and certainly continuing over the next 14 years, 3 months, and 4 days, erasing your digital footprint is almost unimaginable.
It is nearly impossible without deliberate, sophisticated planning and substantial resources.
Right.
The digital footprint is our modern shadow. Every financial transaction, every login, every proximity of a mobile device to a cellular tower registers our existence in a massive network of data.
We are always being tracked.
We are. For all that to stop simultaneously at 5:27 p.m. on December 18, 2011, indicates that Phoenix Coldon, the identity as recognized by society and digital infrastructure, ceased to operate.
Wow.
This absolute finality, combined with the DNA results ruling out a struggle in the car, leaves investigators with a really paradoxical conclusion. She was alone when the vehicle stopped, yet she vanished so completely that she never interacted with modern society's infrastructure again.
This complete void left by official channels and the lack of systemic answers created a horrific reality for Goldia and Lawrence Coldon.
The toll on the family is just brutal.
We have to look at the tragic fallout of their independent search. The parents raised heavy public criticism against local law enforcement for what they perceived as a severe lack of effort and urgency in the critical early days of the investigation.
Which is a common sentiment in these types of cases.
Because they felt abandoned by the system, they were forced to take matters entirely into their own hands. They hired a private investigator out of their own pockets. But more staggeringly, these parents personally went into the streets to interview local drug dealers and sex workers in an attempt to gather any fragments of information about their daughter's fate.
This highlights a deeply troubling burden placed on families when official channels appear to stall.
It's incredibly dangerous.
It is. Consider the immense psychological leap and the inherent physical risk required for middle-class parents, accustomed to a quiet, structured life in Spanish Lake, to independently navigate illicit street networks in East St. Louis.
They were completely out of their depth.
They were stepping entirely outside of their societal framework. They were exposing themselves to potential danger and severe psychological trauma simply because the bureaucratic machinery of the missing persons investigation had ground to a halt.
They felt they had no other choice.
It is a profound testament to parental devotion, but it is equally a glaring indictment of a system that leaves civilians to act as their own detectives in highly volatile environments.
The consequences of this desperation were devastating. Privately funding this massive, sustained search completely drained their life savings.
Every last cent.
The financial strain was so severe that it caused the family home, the very home Phoenix grew up in, to go into foreclosure.
That is just heartbreaking.
And as if the financial and emotional ruin weren't enough, the records indicate they were also the victims of a cruel hoax during this incredibly vulnerable time, with individuals preying on their desperation for malicious reasons.
It's hard to fathom that level of cruelty.
When citizens are forced to become investigators to the point of bankruptcy and losing their home, what does that say about the safety nets that are supposed to protect the public during a crisis?
It says the nets are failing.
It seems like families are forced to navigate a maze with no map while their resources actively drain away, like being forced to build a lifeboat while you were actively drowning.
That's a very accurate comparison. It demonstrates that the safety net is largely contingent on jurisdiction, resources, and often sheer luck.
Geography matters so much.
It does. When a case falls into a jurisdictional blind spot, as this one did across the state line, the institutional momentum is lost. The operational economy of a missing persons case is finite. Police departments have strict budgets, overwhelming caseloads, and shifting daily priorities.
They have to move on to the next case.
Exactly. A family's priority remains completely fixed on their missing child, but their resources do not. The Coldons exhausted every asset they had, financial, emotional, and physical, trying to compensate for a systemic failure.
Everything was poured into the search.
The fact that they lost their home while searching for the person who made it a home is one of the most tragic collateral outcomes of this entire case. It shows how the damage of a disappearance radiates outward, systematically destroying the stability of everyone left in its wake.
That devastation eventually caught the attention of the broader public. Over the years, the case transitioned from a local tragedy to a subject of national media focus, building a really significant media legacy.
It stayed in the public eye.
It was most notably featured in a 2-night special television documentary on the Oxygen Network, which debuted on November 3 and 4 of 2018.
Right.
This production brought in seasoned professionals. Investigative reporter Chandrea Thomas and retired Deputy Police Chief Joe D'Elia, who spent hours on screen dissecting the timeline and the various theories.
It was a very thorough review.
Beyond television, the case became a focal point in the audio documentary space as well. It was deeply profiled on The Vanished in 2016 and again reached a massive audience when it was covered on Crime Junkie in 2023.
You know, the role of the media in a cold case is complex, and it's very double-edged.
Because it brings attention, but at a cost.
Exactly. On one hand, it acts as a secondary, unofficial investigative body. When law enforcement exhausts its immediate leads, media platforms can broadcast the details to millions of people, hoping to dislodge a forgotten memory or a hidden piece of evidence from the public consciousness.
Someone might remember something.
Right. Documentaries featuring professionals like Chandrea Thomas and Joe D'Elia bring fresh, analytical eyes to files that have sat dormant. They can re-interview witnesses or challenge old assumptions.
But there is a downside.
There is. This attention transforms a private family tragedy into public consumption. The case essentially becomes a puzzle for the public to solve. But undeniably, This sustained media attention from 2016 onward has ensured that Phoenix Coldon's name remains active in the public record, preventing the case from being permanently sealed away in a storage archive.
Through this media coverage, analysts began to connect Phoenix's disappearance to a broader, highly disturbing pattern.
The structural similarities to other cases.
Right. Her case fits into a very specific, baffling subcategory of missing persons cases. Individuals who mysteriously vanish under circumstances where the discovery of their abandoned car actually precedes them being reported missing.
The sequence is totally flipped.
It is. The records link her case to several other high-profile disappearances with the exact same hallmark. There is the disappearance of Stacey English in Atlanta. There is the heavily analyzed case of Maura Murray in 2004.
That's a very well-known one.
There is Brianna Maitland, a 17-year-old who vanished in Vermont, also in 2004, and Patricia Meehan, a 37-year-old woman who disappeared in Montana in 1989.
Right.
In every single one of these instances, the empty vehicle was found before the authorities even knew the driver was gone.
We really must look at the mechanics of why this specific subcategory, the preemptive abandoned car, is so notoriously difficult to resolve.
Because the starting line is wrong.
Precisely. In a standard investigation, a missing person report is filed first. The search then radiates outward from their last known location, often ending with the discovery of their vehicle.
The vehicle is the end of the trail.
Right. The vehicle provides a definitive endpoint to their mobility and gives investigators a precise location to begin searching for the person. But in these specific cases, the sequence is inverted. The vehicle is found first, acting as a false starting point.
They find the evidence before they know a crime occurred.
Yes. Law enforcement encounters an empty machine on the side of the road before they even have a victim's profile to work with. The vehicle tells investigators exactly where the mechanical mobility ended, but it offers zero-vector data on where the human trajectory went next.
It's completely static.
The car becomes a static artifact in a dynamic environment. Furthermore, because the car is often processed simply as abandoned property or a parking violation before the missing person report connects to it, crucial trace evidence is frequently lost, contaminated, or degraded during the towing and impound process.
It's a chilling reality. The abandoned car is basically a monument to the exact moment the timeline shatters.
That's exactly what it is.
It sits there on the side of the road, holding all the physical context, the glasses, the shoes, the purse, but refusing to offer a narrative. With all this massive media attention from 2016 through 2023, why does awareness rarely translate to resolution in cases with this specific pattern?
It's frustrating for everyone involved.
We have millions of people looking at the details of Maura Murray, Brianna Maitland, and Phoenix Coldon, yet the cars remain the final silent witnesses.
Awareness rarely translates to resolution in these specific patterns because public awareness cannot generate new physical evidence from a contaminated timeline.
You can't undo the impound process.
Exactly. When a car is left running, or keys are left in the ignition, or purses are left on the seat, the immediate forensic window is incredibly narrow. If that window is missed due to jurisdictional errors, as we saw with the Missouri-Illinois border, or due to the vehicle being treated merely as a tow job, the trail goes instantly cold.
It's gone forever.
Media awareness can apply pressure to law enforcement to reopen files, and it can generate peripheral tips, but it cannot rewind time. You cannot capture the microscopic trace evidence, the scent trails, or the immediate eyewitness testimony that was lost in the crucial first 48 hours.
Right.
The abandoned car is a monument, but it is a monument to an event that concluded before the formal investigation ever began.
And so we are left looking at the sheer weight of the timeline. 14 years, 3 months, and 4 days.
A staggering amount of time.
That is how long it has been since a 23-year-old junior fencing champion backed out of her driveway in Spanish Lake, Missouri at 3:00 p.m. on a Sunday. It is a span of time that has seen the complete exhaustion of her parents' resources, the painful loss of their home, and the silent, unyielding presence of a black Chevy Blazer sitting in an impound lot, holding onto a pair of glasses and a pair of shoes.
It's profoundly tragic.
It is a case that forces us to look at the massive blind spots in our jurisdictions and the terrifying reality that someone can simply step out of their life and never be documented again.
You know, this leaves you with a final, vital consideration about the world we navigate every day.
Let's hear it.
We live in an era where we believe ourselves to be constantly tethered to society. We are tracked by cellular towers, recorded by municipal traffic cameras, logged by bank transactions, and identified by advanced DNA analytics.
We feel very monitored.
Right. We rely on a vast, invisible digital safety net that we assume is always watching over us, making it impossible to truly vanish without leaving a data trail.
But this case challenges that.
Completely. If a disciplined 23-year-old woman can leave her home for a routine errand, abandon her vehicle just 25 minutes away across the state line, leave her essential items behind, and effectively evaporate from the historical record for over 14 years without triggering a single digital or forensic tripwire.
It makes you wonder.
Exactly. How secure is that safety net, really? The disappearance of Phoenix Coldon suggests that the systems we trust to keep us anchored to the world are far more fragile and far easier to slip through than we could ever comfortably admit.
Thanks for listening.